Stop the $200 billion mistake that could erase China. Sirens cut through humid night as operators glare at screens that won't agree. 90 minutes to peak head. One spill gate hesitates, an intake hoist groans, and someone mutters the math. 2 hours to Wuhan if this goes wrong. InSAR arcs show millimeter shift sinking to last week's rise. NASA's reservoir load math flashes in a slide tiny changes to Earth's rotation, massive pressure right here. Phones light with PLA protocol, lifeline and target, war footing during a storm. Insurance emails hit inboxes mid-shift. Drills match dam break maps. You think you know this story. Here's the twist, they plan like it might fail. We're not here to sell concrete. We're here to read receipts. InSAR time series, hydrology curves, turbine wear logs, procurement bursts, and calendars. The PLA didn't expect you to line up. Because numbers don't care about speeches and satellites don't salute. The claim is blunt. China's greatest engineering feat is also its softest pressure point, and the system around it behaves like it knows. We'll prove two things. First, the vulnerability is measurable in rock, steel, and water. Second, the concealment leaves fingerprints, money, metadata, and drills that point to a playbook built around failure windows, not swagger. Start with physics you can't spin. Interferometric synthetic aperture radar. InSAR tracks ground motion down to millimeters. Peer-reviewed studies over the Three Gorges Reservoir show seasonal deformation tied to pool swings. Hills breathe when the water climbs, then settle, but not always back to baseline. That rhythm matters because the structure sits inside that theater. When the pool rises, uplift grows, joints torque, and drains earn their pay. Quiet tenders for more piezometers, deeper grout curtains, and longer drains right after rough seasons are not decoration. They're a reaction to readings that pushed comfort. Now zoom out to scale. NASA's work on how big reservoirs nudge Earth's rotation isn't bar trivia, it's load in plain numbers. Move enough water inland and you shave microseconds off the day. If the planet feels it, the concrete does too, through head, uplift, and stress fields that shift just enough to matter when you're already close to the line. Head rises, uplift fights weight, thermal expansion plays tug of war with differential settlement. Add sediment, and you get the slow kill. The Yangtze silt sandblasts runners, roughens blades, and makes turbine cavitation start earlier at lower heads. You know how it goes. Roughness seeds bubbles, bubbles implode, pits spread, vibration climbs. That shakes galleries and pushes conservative calls right when storms hit. Protect machines, levels climb. Push water, machines scream. That loop is where margin goes to die. Money tells on all of it. Maintenance should be a smooth curve on a plant this size. Instead, you see sawtooth spikes, rush orders for seals, bearings, drainage pumps, and control boards right after sediment-heavy passes. Air-freighted parts that should travel by rail. Reinsurance layers that quietly thicken after clustered floods in the 200 ones. Municipal, resilience, bonds downstream funding levee tops and pump stations, time to the same storm stacks. If the wall made risk vanish, while cities buying Plan B at scale. Here's where it gets interesting. Civil defense apps push flood drills that mirror published dam break footprints. Hospitals rehearse generator hours and stairwells. Grid operators schedule maintenance, blackouts that kiss forecast crests, and run black start islands like it's a pop quiz. Logistics shifts inland, bridges take temporary load limits, and air defense belts migrate to guard rail hubs during storm weeks. That's the PLA overlay, lifeline and target in the same paragraph. They train like water and war could hit at once. You think you need a nuke to break a giant? You don't. Precision salvos at intake gates, spillway aerators, and drainage pump switchgear during peak head would force conservative choices. Non-kinetic hits blind sensors for minutes and jam comms while rain roars. The safe move, protect the structure, floods downstream hard, drowning bridges, stalling rails, and choking ports. That's coercive flooding. The dam survives. The campaign timeline doesn't. In a Taiwan scenario, a soaked central corridor buys days you can't replace. Open source makes the concealment leak. Night lights dim in repeating belts ahead of crests. Altimetry tracks discharge asymmetry. AIS shows barges stacking cement and aggregate near upstream yards before typhoons. Satellite color shifts on spillway lips appear in the dry. Retail spikes for water and batteries hit prefectures that match inundation models. None of this is a single smoking gun. Together, it's a map. So here's the road map. We start at the blueprint, the footnotes where uplift bands clarified and rule curves edged. We follow the money, accounting gaps, reinsurance, rush spares. We read the river, sediment load, drawdown windows, backflow. We watch the ground, InSAR seasons, grout curtains, drains. We pull the PLA drills into focus, then run strike math and the slow kill clock. We overlay El Niño and atmospheric rivers, and we end with a failure tree. What sticks first, what spirals next, and how many hours the map needs to change. The question we'll answer is simple and sharp. Does the system treat this wall as stable or expendable under pressure? Because if the asset that powers a nation also holds it hostage, every rainy season becomes a vote on the story Beijing tells, and the one the data tells back. Blueprint to battlefield. Understand the lie in the footnotes. Go back to meeting rooms in the 1990s and cofferdams in the 2000s, where the promise met rock. On paper, the wall looked overbuilt. Gravity mass keyed deep into bedrock, broad spillways, dense inspection galleries, and a sensor web to watch everything. The slogan was simple: mass beats water, gauges catch the rest. But here's where things get interesting. As soon as the first test seasons hit, quiet edits crept in. Load models clarified. Uplift pressure bands updated to reflect observations. Seismic allowances nudged by a hair. It didn't scream failure, it whispered margin drift. Engineers wrote settlement at the abutments as conservative, then revised it to within acceptable range given seasonal head. Acceptable to whom? After rough wet years, seepage allowances widened in technical notes. That's a tell. Nobody widens those unless readings pushed comfort. Slope stability appendices for upstream banks got longer too. The reservoir isn't a bathtub, it's a moving shoreline. When pool level rises, slopes breathe. The operators knew because the gauges told them. Procurement told you louder. Tenders for extra piezometers, longer drains, and deeper grout curtains arriving right after heavy seasons, not on some neat 5-year plan. Now zoom into the mechanics. Raise head, and uplift tries to pry concrete off its foundation. You counter with weight, drains, and sealed rock. If drainage galleries show rising pressure while pumps run, you don't write speeches. You drill more drains and thicken curtains. Thermal expansion is expected. Differential settlement early on is expected. What you don't want is cycle-locked drift that doesn't fully rebound when pool drops. The instruments saw that rhythm. The response wasn't a press conference, it was more hardware. Spillway math on paper bought headroom for a design storm. In the room, everyone knows the curve lives, not just the mean. Then the 2010s handed out stacks, not averages. Quiet rule curve tweaks trimmed seasonal bands to buy time earlier. When drawdown windows shrink, you run closer to red. If an intake gate sticks or a spillway nap loses air cushion under sediment-loaded flow, cavitation eats concrete and steel faster. Cavitation isn't theory. It's the sound a runner makes when vapor bubbles implode and pit metal. Once pitted, the next storm bites earlier at lower heads. Operators then face a bad trade. Spill more to protect turbines or throttle spill to protect slabs and lose room. Margin bleeds either way. Here's the twist. Satellite eyes join the chorus. InSAR time series across the reservoir maps seasonal slope motion tied to pool cycles, millimeters that add up. Different from the dam body, yes, but the physics rhyme. Water up, ground answers. Inside, joint meters and plumb lines felt that ecosystem change as uplift and temperature played tug of war with micro settlements. After the hardest seasons, orders arrived for foundation remediation, expansion joint treatment, and anchorage enhancement. You don't add anchors to a gravity dam for fun. You do it when real loads, real heat, and real uplift thin margins you thought were fat. Money cadence gave away doctrine drift. The wall began as pride and grid backbone. In planning binders, it gained a second label, lifeline node and high-value target. That dual tag changes choices. Suddenly, maintenance windows slid toward crest forecasts, cover to rehearse black start and islanding. Fiber rerouted around galleries, Control cabinets hardened, redundant comms stacked in. Bridges and rails got mapped with alternates as if some crossings couldn't be trusted for a week. That's not optics. That's a playbook for two fights at once: the river and an adversary who'd love the river to help. Blueprint edits kept pace. Aeration geometry on spillways saw subtle retrofits, beveled lips, tuned ramps, to keep the nap cushioned at higher heads with more grit. Intake trash racks got clearance optimization, which is code for stronger hinges and faster crane cycles, because debris loads rose with slope creep and land use change. Drainage capacity expanded. Pump specs climbed toward more grit-tolerant designs. Sensors doubled up with dual power and fiber diversity, because thunderstorms don't care about single points of failure. Each change is rational on its own. In sequence, it's an admission. Lived storms outran the brochure. Now add NASA's reservoir load finding as scale context. Move that much mass inland and Earth's rotation ticks by microseconds. If the planet notices, a grout curtain will too. That's not a scare line. It's a sanity check on why uplift bands and drain flows don't sit still year to year. Combine that with the Yangtze sediment, abrasive, relentless, and you get turbine cavitation starting sooner at lower heads, runners swapping earlier than the original cycle, and vibration signatures creeping up a notch each wet year. Procurement mirrored it. Expedited runner sets, ceramic-coated pump parts, and emergency actuator kits shipped by air when they should have come by rail. Meanwhile, operations doctrine hardened into wartime rhythm. Civil defense apps drilled routes that mirror dam break footprints. Hospitals tested stairwells and ICU generator hours. Grid operators rehearsed islanding the night before forecast peaks, not after. Engineering regiments practiced pontoon spans where scour maps say approaches might drown. Air defense coverage belts shifted inland during storm stacks, protecting the logistics spine if river crossings faltered. The blueprint, in practice, became a battlefield diagram. And that's when it gets wild. Redundancy, more bays, more pumps, more comms, saves you on blue sky days, but under stacked stress it becomes surface area. More actuators that can jam, more cabinets that can trip, more interfaces a cyber nudge can confuse. The engineers know. They added analog fallbacks and manual gate paths, trained cross-skilled crews, staged spares inland. All smart, all signals. By the late 2010s, the picture is clear. The wall stands, but the footnotes lengthened. Rule bands edged. Grout curtains deepened. Aeration geometry changed. Drills time to rain, not parades. The paper trail doesn't predict a cinematic break. It maps a margin managed in real time. And once the PLA stamps lifeline and target on the same page, the blueprint stops being just engineering. It becomes war planning written in concrete and water. The $200 billion accounting gap. Follow the money, because paper trails don't salute the flag. On a plant this size, maintenance should arc smooth. Predictable overhauls, planned runner swaps, 5-year refits that show up like clockwork. Instead, the ledger jumps like a heart monitor in a thunderstorm. Right after ugly, sediment-heavy seasons, procurement bursts hit. Seals by the pallet, thrust bearings, wicket gate bushings, drainage pumps, ceramic-coated impellers, control boards for actuator drives. And here's where things get interesting. Shipping terms flip to air freight for components that should crawl by rail. You only burn jet fuel when downtime risk beats common sense. Line up the dates with the water. The spikes don't match tidy overhauls. They shadow stacked storms and drawdown squeezes. Cavitation scrapes runners during high silt. Vibration thresholds trip. Operators trim load to save metal. Revenue dips. Weeks later, tenders read expedited runner sets. Availability assurance packages for gate actuators. Auxiliary pump redundancy for galleries. That's the plant buying back margin it spent during a dirty pass. If the system were gliding, those lists would live in annual plans. They live in Tuesdays after typhoons. Insurance turns the subtext into price. Reinsurers in the region padded cat layers after the late 201's flood clusters. Higher deductibles, fresh exclusions for cascade hydrological events, limits shaved for multi-dam sequences. No one prints Three Gorges in a brochure. They don't need to. The models got meaner, so premiums climbed. Operators responded how state giants respond: self-insurance pools, captive fronts, and a polite shift of risk into provincial buckets labeled flood control initiatives. The same risk, laundered through softer words. Now watch retail tariffs. Provinces downstream nudge rates right after routine maintenance that lands suspiciously close to forecast crests. Night lights dim along belts that match islanding rehearsals, factories throttle for a few hours, then life resumes. On the balance sheet, it's pennies. On a national grid, it's a whisper that uptime isn't as flat as the speeches. And the cadence syncs with procurement. Tariff wiggle here, rush spares there, overtime on a Sunday, because a bank of drainage pumps didn't love last week's grit. Suppliers tell on the whole machine. Steel mills report surges in cavitation-resistant alloy orders. Coating vendors move more epoxy systems rated for high-velocity spillways. Grout makers book night shifts for pressure injection kits. Actuator firms sell refurbishment suites that look a lot like emergency spares. Delivery windows tighten, payment terms shift toward heavier advances, and small print ads force Madura language around storm season. If this were routine aging, these flows would smooth out. They spike where the hydrograph spikes. Here's the twist. Municipal bonds echo the ledger in code. Prefectures float, resilience paper with line items for levy raises, pump stations on higher plinths, substation relocations, hospital generators upsized to run HVAC for 48 hours. The issuance clusters late in the year after the same stacked storms. If the upstream wall erased risk, why buy Plan B? Because local managers price what they live. Backflow that drowns low streets, long conservative releases that soak switchyards, and trucks that can't cross for days. Markets don't buy speeches, they buy coupons. There's also the blackout ballet. Grid operators schedule testing, windows that kiss the crest calendar. Substations drop, black start islands hum, SDATCOMs click over to hold voltage while large machines wobble in spray. The lost megawatt hours hide in footnotes. The real cost sits in payroll, overtime, and the inventory you didn't ship at 2 a.m. These rehearsals aren't PR. They're the price of an operating story that moved beyond the brochure. Procurement metadata gives us micro-stories. A control board order marks urgent. PLC I/O misreads under high humidity. A seal kit request doubles quantity due to accelerated wear in high silt operations. A pump spec adds ceramic liners to mitigate fine abrasion during extended high head. None of that language belongs to a calm river. It belongs to crews who heard gravel in the galleries last week and don't want to hear it again. Now the accounting hole. Roll the full project spend, construction, relocation, grid tie-ins, upstream works, and you land near $200 billion. Add disclosed maintenance, retrofits, associated river management improvements, and you're still short of what parts lists imply. Where's the delta? Off-ledger in provincial, flood control, emergency funds after meteorological anomalies, and SOE blends where hydropower hides in infrastructure optimization. It's not fraud, it's political accounting. Same steel, softer label. Suppliers with PLA ties add another layer. The units that pour grout in peacetime also throw pontoon bridges in floods. Vendors that read key water infrastructure support go to firms with military engineering badges. That buys speed, security, and crews who can work under blackout with radios that don't ride public nets. It also muddies budgets, civil on the cover, dual use inside. Here, where markets and satellites converge. AIS shows barges full of aggregate and cement parking near upstream yards before typhoons. Sentinel frames spot fresh patch tones on spillway lips in dry spells after nothing to see here. Night lights dim in the same prefectures that filed bigger generator grants. Reinsurance quotes tick up the same quarter rush spares flew by air. You don't need leaks, you need a spreadsheet and orbits. Two final tells. Retail apps show bottled water and battery spikes days before official alerts. People time their carts to maintenance calendars now. And factory disclosures bragging on time delivery start footnoting weather-related logistics adjustments in the exact week's islanding tests roll. Soft phrasing, hard rhythm. So add it up: air-freighted runners, actuator kits, drainage upgrades, ceramic pump parts, fatter reinsurance, tariff wiggles, resilience bonds, black start rehearsals. You blow past tidy narratives. The gap isn't math error. It's the premium for running 2 stories at once. Invincible on stage, urgent in the control room. And urgency is expensive. Hydrology, the brochures skip. Follow the water because it writes the rules. On paper, designers counted on scouring flows to shove the Yangtze's silt downstream. In practice, flood control asks you to hold water longer and slow the river, and that turns the reservoir into a settling pond. Each season, a little more live storage turns to dead storage. That loss doesn't make headlines, but it eats your drawdown window, the precious hours you need when the sky stacks storms back to back. Here's where things get interesting. The brochure math leans on a design storm and clean margins. The 2010s dealt clusters, atmospheric rivers lining up like boxcars, El Niño tilting the jet so moisture plumes hit the same basins twice before you breathe. Travel time turns a forecast gap into a blur. You plan a neat stair-step release. Tributaries arrive early. The pool climbs anyway. When the window shrinks, every command matters. A slow gate actuation, a false alarm in spray, a trash rack crane that needs one more reset. Those minutes become meters. Sediment is the quiet tax that makes those minutes hurt. During high silt passes, turbines take a sandstorm. You can hear it in the gallery, first a hiss, then a harsh note as cavitation starts earlier at lower heads because roughened blades shed their smooth skin. Cavitation is not some abstract demon. It's vapor bubbles forming and imploding against steel, pitting runners and chewing wicket gates. Each pit is a seed for the next one. Vibration spreads through the machine, across bearings into concrete. Operators trim load to protect metal, and that pushes more of the river to spillways. More spill at high head with grit in the flow grinds chutes like a belt sander. Protect the machines, head creeps up. Protect the slabs, machines scream. That's your ugly loop. Spillways are the pressure valve, but only if the nap rides on healthy air. High head plus fine silt can strip the cushion right where you need it most. If aerators were tuned for a friendlier river, the nap thins, wakes get jumpy, and cavitation cells start biting concrete at the lip and along slab joints. Once a patch roughens, flow separates sooner, air entrainment gets patchy, and the next storm starts carving fast. Crews can grout, anchor, and bevel in the dry months. In the wet, you make do. Stagger bays to share pain, shift openings to spare a pitted chute, bias flow to units with fresher runners. Every workaround costs somewhere else. Backflow is the side punch the brochures downplay. When the mainstem rides high, tributary crests can't dump cleanly. They back up into towns built tight to channels during the 2010s boom. Pumps work until screens jam on weeds, bags, and the first rooflines peeled off a hillside slide. Those pumps sit a meter too low because 20 years ago that seemed safe. Meanwhile, levee raises downstream squeeze the river tighter, higher, faster. When you release to save the structure, you push water into places debris never learn to be wet. InSAR time series across the reservoir zone show seasonal creep on slopes that accelerate with fast pool rises. That isn't about the dam face, it's about the theater around it. Hillsides ease, gullies move, and a rain-loosened slice becomes a brown raft big enough to jam a boom. Booms strain, cranes grind, trash racks foul. Lose one intake bay and the neighbors take more flow while head ticks up. Micro story. A crane brake chatters in a thunder cell. Protocol says stop and confirm. You lose 5 minutes you can't buy back. Operators push smart counters. Pre-release earlier when models sniff an atmospheric river. Gate tests at night so actuators don't surprise you at noon. Run turbines a notch off best efficiency to settle vibration. Dose more air into the nap to keep the cushion fat under grit. Feather openings across bays to avoid starving one chute into incipient cavitation. Rotate units to spread abrasion. They even pull dredgers to nibble sediment tongues near intakes late in the dry. All of it fights physics for time. Here's the twist. The rules themselves moved. Seasonal storage bands edged lower ahead of known El Niño winters. Drawdown targets slid earlier. You don't touch rule curves unless the lived hydrograph shoved you. Those edits don't change total flood control volume. They change timing. buying room days earlier, admitting you might need it. Quiet midnight gate drills map to the same story. You don't rehearse fast, open sequences in rain unless a slow open nearly bit you. You don't add grit-tolerant drainage pumps and lengthen lines unless heads rose faster than galleries like last year. Thermal and uplift dance through all this. Warm concrete expands, cool water shrinks it, differential settlement finds its bias over seasons. None of that breaks a dam by itself. It tightens tolerances. A gate guide that tolerated a hair of misalignment at mid-pool starts to stick at top band in spray. A spillway slab that lived happy with a thin air cushion needs more help when silt scrubs that cushion away. Drains that cleared last year run a few liters per second higher at the same head because fines found new paths. Hydrology wrote those tweaks, not politics. Downstream, stage duration curves matter more than peaks. Conservative releases to protect slabs and machines stretch floods into long soaks. Bridges don't snap, approaches drown. Rails don't fail from force, ballast goes soup. Substations don't melt, they arc in mist and sit dark behind water. That's why prefectures bought extra pumps and raised walls with resilience bonds. They priced the new curve. So the water story isn't doom, it's debt. Silt steals storage and chews steel. Atmospheric rivers crush timing. Backflows punish floodplain growth. Slopes feed debris the hour you need clean faces. Each fix buys margin today and spends a little tomorrow. The wall still holds. The river keeps asking louder each season. When the next cluster hits, how many minutes do you really have? Foundation, slippage, and the S-shape rumor. Okay, so the water keeps taxing the system. But the ground under it, that's the bill you can't ignore. And InSAR doesn't care about pride. Time series interferometric synthetic aperture radar over the reservoir shows seasonal deformation sink to pool swings. Hills breathe when levels rise, millimeters to centimeters in known slide belts, then ease back when the pool drops. Except some spots don't come all the way home. That partial rebound is the tell. It means cyclic loading is writing a small, new normal into the landscape. The dam sits inside that theater, not outside it. Here's where things get interesting. Inside the galleries, the instruments hear the same rhythm. Plumb lines drift a hair under top band, joint meters register micro opening at contraction joints, uplift piezometers tick higher faster in wet weeks. Thermal expansion is the easy part. Heat up, grow, cool down, shrink. Differential settlement is the part you argue about. Early, then it should taper. When logs show cycle-locked bias that doesn't flatline, crews don't argue. They buy steel and cement. Tenders appear after hard seasons for deeper grout curtains, extended drain lines, and extra anchors across key joints. You don't lace a gravity dam with more anchors unless uplift pathways are livelier than the model liked. Now the S-shape rumor. Pixelated photos on social feeds claim the crest bent into a snake. Let's kill the cartoon without killing the concern. Optical images lie easily. Lens distortion, perspective, water glare, and stitch errors fake curves on any long structure. The dam is a monolith built from blocks with contraction joints. It will never look ruler straight from every angle. The real signal isn't a meme. It's measurement cadence and language drift. When footnotes widen seepage allowances within seasonal tolerance, when uplift bands get clarified after observations, that's a quiet admission the cycle is doing work. Not a dramatic bend, incremental movement coupled to head. Foundation behavior explains the buys. The rock under gravity dam isn't a cartoon slab. It's a stack of joints, weathered zones, and grout fans trying to knit them tight. High head loads lift poor pressures in foundation rock. Drains carry that pressure to galleries. Pumps push it away. If fines migrate under repeated cycles, some drains lose bite. Heads in the rock climb at the same reservoir level that felt calmer last year, and your uplift safety factor thins. Crews answer with pressure grouting, cement slurries to choke paths, deeper fans to intercept new fractures, and with added drains. Anchors across slabs and along contraction joints pick up where friction used to be enough. Meanwhile, slopes around the pool move in time with level. InSAR maps the slow movers, the usual suspects by lithology and orientation, speeding up when the pool rises fast. Those aren't dam blocks, but they feed the system. A slope sneeze after a soaked week sends a brown raft toward booms, racks foul, an intake bay loses minutes, and head ticks up while operators clear steel-hard drift in rain and lightning. That's how regional movement becomes local margin. Micro-cracking is the ghost you only see in the logs. Spillway cavitation chews during events. Foundation micro-cracks whisper afterward. If drainage flow at a given head sits a touch higher than last season, after you've cleaned lines and checked pumps, you assume pathways open. Add grit to drains and the pump curve slides. Efficiency drops a few points just when you want more. So pumps get ceramic coatings, better seals, and bigger motors in the next tender. Gallery humidity monitors get tighter limits. Cabinet heaters get upsized. The fix list is a breadcrumb trail back to the same route. Cycles right by us. Here's the twist. NASA's reservoir load math, those microseconds shaved off Earth's rotation when you move inland water, sounds like trivia until you ask what that scale means for rock and grout under peak head. Short answer, enough to nudge uplift and stress patterns you thought were static. If the planet notices, the joint will too. No one's claiming catastrophic displacement. We're saying the signal is big enough that small, repeating shifts in uplift and stress fields are rational, not scandalous. The scandal is pretending the field stayed flat, while the operators kept adding drains. Engineers didn't sit still. Aeration tweaks at spillway lips help keep nap cushion healthy so slabs don't see raw hammering when grit, S in the flow. Edge bevels reduce separation points. Anchors get retentioned or added along panels where past pitting started. Contraction joint seals step up to designs that tolerate more shear without tearing. Gate guides see alignment optimization, which is code for machining, shimming, or even plate replacement, so a leaf that ran fine at mid-pool won't stick at top band in spray. The checklists after storm season grow teeth. Fast open drills on sketchy bays, cross-training on manual hoists, and analog fallback paths mapped and labeled. Now about sensors. Doubling instruments isn't paranoia, it's a bandwidth problem. During peak events, false positives spike, spray shorts a connector here, lightning jitters a ground there, and the HMI blinks warnings like a slot machine. Redundant piezometers, dual power nodes, fiber reroutes away from wet galleries, and hardened cabinets aren't vanity. They're how you separate noise from signal when minutes decide whether you eat cavitation on a slab or on a runner. The landslide ledger ties back in. Named slopes up reservoir, mapped in peer-reviewed work, show acceleration under fast pool rises. In practice, that means debris pulses at the wrong hour, heavier trash loads on booms, more crane cycles, and the one sticky rack hinge that costs you 5 minutes. So operators add slope radar, more cameras, and patrol boats staged where pulses usually emerge. The human move is simple, be there before the raft is. Plot twist, the important S isn't a shape on a photo. It's an S-curve of risk maturity. Early years, steep learning, then a calm plateau as retrofits land. The 201 storm clusters kick the curve back up, new loads, new wear, new bias. Hardware keeps pace mostly. Doctrine shifts from prove invincibility to manage minutes. The lie isn't that the dam is bending into a snake. The lie is that the ground story is finished. It is. It's seasonal, measurable, and funded line by line. So where does that leave us? With a foundation that talks louder under peak head, galleries that run pumps a little harder each bad year, slopes that breathe with the pool, and crews that answer with steel, grout, drains, and drills. Not panic, process. A process that admits margin lives in minutes when the crest arrives. That's the truth the instruments tell, even when the photos don't. PLA playbook, drills, evacuations, and blackout windows. Here's where things get interesting. When you stop reading speeches and start reading calendars, the pattern won't sit still. Civil defense apps push flood scenario, rehearsals in tight clusters along the Yangtze, never random. The alerts sound boring on purpose. Evacuate to Zone B, bring 2 days of water, meet at School 3. But the polygons, those shaded footprints, match published dam break inundation maps, not approximations. The geometry lines up with modeled wave travel times and stage depth. People walk those routes in sunshine, so their legs remember them when sirens cut through thunder. Hospitals run a different script on the same days. Comms resilience drills quietly stack flood surge with power loss. Staff move ICU patients upstairs, flip to generators, and then, here the twist, simulate tower and fiber failure. Sat phones come out. Paper charts backstop digital. They count diesel hours under full HVAC because that's the real bottleneck. Air for lungs, not just lights for hallways. The timing isn't random. It kisses the reservoir rule bands when operators ride the top of the seasonal curve. Unknown to most of the city across town, the grid does a ballet at night. Maintenance. Blackouts drop street by street the evening before a forecast crest. Substations island on purpose, trip off the backbone, run local loops, and rejoin under load. Black start drills light a few neighborhoods, then a district, then everything snaps dark and comes back smoother. SDATCOMs hum to teach the waveform manners in mist. The cadence mirrors hydrology calls. If the hydrograph says Thursday rides high, dispatch runs the pop quiz on Wednesday night. While the wires rehearse, asphalt shifts. Bridges hugging the river take surprise load limits, pending inspection. Trucks detour inland on long arcs you wouldn't choose on a clear day. Rail dispatch pushes consists to higher sidings, pulls maintenance windows forward on low approach spans, and pre-positions repair gangs at scour-prone abutments. Container yards near the waterline get thin, and the backlog shows up a county inland, right where flood maps say you'll still have gravel under your tires after a day of rain. There's a martial rhythm behind the clipboards. The PLA treats floods as hazard and weapon. Air defense belts migrate a notch inland during storm stacks, not to abandon the river, but to guard the rail hubs and alternate bridges that become the spine if crossings drown. Radar trucks park on ridgelines that cover both inbound air and the only dry road for 40 miles. Engineering regiments drill pontoon spans on practice grounds shaped like known scour hotspots. Pontoon parks look like disaster relief. They're also a bridge kit for a week where concrete is under brown water. Comms shift too. Police and emergency nets flip to encrypted channels, then run quick analog fallbacks as if fiber snapped under the river. For 10 minutes, texts lag. Voice hops to microwave. Control rooms run sensor injects in sandboxes. Synthetic level spikes for operators in training suites, while live crews check that the sim never bleeds. That's not paranoia. That's practicing for a night when lightning, spray, and a cheap jammer muddle the same second. Retail gives away the drill even when officials won't. Bottled water and battery sales pop in prefectures where those dam break polygons shade darkest, and they pop 2 days before rain. Pharmacies in those belts stock insulin and antibiotics like they got a whisper. Hardware stores sell out of sump pumps and contractor bags, not over a holiday, over a midweek maintenance notice. People remember last season's test that went long and planned for this one. The river police get busier, quietly. Boom crews check anchors twice on calm afternoons. Crane teams rotate to night shifts the week a crest window opens. Patrol boats stage at coves where past debris pulses emerged after fast pool rises, thanks to an SAR mapped slope creep-up reservoir. That slope motion isn't the dam, it's the theater. But the theater throws logs the size of buses when it exhales, and one jammed bay at peak head is a meter of trouble you can't spare. Here's the twist that changes the tone. Drills bunch not just around storm clusters, but around live fire calendars across the strait. When precision strike chatter spikes, so do islanding rehearsals and evacuation walkthroughs. It's not proof of intent, it's a hedge baked into doctrine. The asset is tagged lifeline and target in the same file. So they practice 2 fights at once, water you can't argue with, and an adversary who'd love the water to do the damage. You see it in logistics pre-staging that pretends to be mundane. Fuel Bowsers park on school fields up a hill. Mobile bridges sit on flatbeds near county seats. Helicopter pads get fresh paint and portable lights. Inland depots quietly extend hours and take delivery of kerosene a week early. AIS shows barge booms repositioned in front of powerhouse faces that also double as drone nets. The choreography reads like overkill until you lay it on a hydrograph. Then it reads like breath control before a long dive. Grid dispatch studies reactive support on rainy Tuesday midnights. That says loud what no one will. If a bay trips and a governor protects a screaming runner, you'll lose megawatts in seconds. Voltage sags, phase angles wander, and islands have to stand on their own until the backbone stops hissing in spray. Shunt banks click, SDATCOMs stretch. Operators ride numbers that punish slow fingers. Those nights cost peril and a little pride. They buy muscle memory under noise. Residents hear sirens that blend flood and air raid tones for a minute to test range. Kids laugh. Parents count steps. A few post the map on their fridge. The PLA shrugs in public and calls it routine. The calendars say it's a ritual with a clock, crest windows, El Niño pulses, and exercise seasons linked by arrows. No press office will say it. They don't have to. Drills echo inundation maps. Blackouts warm up black start. Bridges and rails rehearse detours. Air defenses cover the inland spine. The plan treats failure as a mode, not an edge case, and trains civilian legs and military hands to meet in the dark on purpose before the water arrives. Strike math, how to break a giant without nukes. You think you need a doomsday weapon to move a wall like this? You don't. You need timing, accuracy, and the river doing most of the work for free. Here, that's where things get interesting. The dam's strength is mass, its weakness is complexity. So you don't try to pulverize concrete. You aim to make a few key parts fail just long enough that operators choose the safe move, and the safe move floods their own spine. Start with targets that matter when head runs high. Intake gates and their hoists govern turbine flow. Spillway chutes burn the heat when machines need mercy. And in the guts, drainage pumps and switchgear keep uplift tame and brains online. A first probe can be small, precision rounds that map defenses and force manning. The main salvo follows the rhythm of the storm, not the clock. Hit intake actuator housings and gate guides to create millimeter misalignments that jam a leaf at peak pressure. One stuck bay at top band shoves more flow to neighbors. Neighbors cavitate earlier. Cavitation pits concrete and steel. Pitting forces operators to back off to save the slab, which drives head higher. That's your ratchet. Now work the spillways. Aerators are the cushion under the nap, and grit tries to steal that air. A warhead set to detonate upstream of an aerator ramp can distort the sheet, thin the cushion, and trigger cavitation where it wants to start, lip joints and beveled edges. You're not blowing a chute off its anchors. You're pushing it closer to the damage curve so the next minute of flow does the carving. Meanwhile, drones buzz the face as cheap noise. Some carry small charges for housings and cameras. Most just soak up point defense and force visual checks in spray. Non-kinetics tilt the board. You don't need to own the whole network. You just need seconds of confusion. Blind a few level sensors, fuzz a flow meter by a couple %, or crash an HMI so the crew reboots during a gate move. Jam radio nets between bays while lightning already wrecks signal to noise. Spoof GPS near the site to mess with timing on less hardened devices and drone defenders. The goal isn't silence, it's delay. Under rain and alarms, human bandwidth is the currency. Timing is the math. Wait for stacked storms. When the reservoir rides the top band, sediment is high and operators are juggling. Turbines run rougher. Spillway aeration is tighter. Uplift margins depend on pumps that hate grit. Fire first at intakes to choke machine flow. Force spill earlier and harder. Then nick the chutes where cavitation seeds live. In the galleries, aim for drainage pump switchgear or the backup feed that powers piezometers and node relays. Lose a pump bank at the wrong second and uplift creeps. Lose the display that translates piezometer heads into a calm decision and you buy panic. Standoff matters because weather is already an ally. Cruise missiles from subs, long-range rockets from inland launchers, standoff air if a window opens. None of it has to be heavy. It has to be precise and near simultaneous. Commercial radar satellites give battle damage assessment in hours. Even cloud-piercing SAR can see asymmetry in discharge plumes a few kilometers downstream. Drones close in watch nap shape, spray angle, and gate plumes. They'll know which bay stuck before the press office does. Redundancy helps defenders until it becomes surface area. More gates mean more actuators, seals, and guides to jam. More pumps mean more breakers and control cabinets a wiper can touch. More comms paths mean more interfaces a jammer can garble. Engineers fight back with analog fallbacks, manual gate drives, shielded cabinets, redundant fiber that dodges wet galleries, and gate interlocks that tolerate misalignment. They pre-release to drop head, stage spares inland, and drill manual sequences under blackout. All smart. But weather holds the high ground. If head sits near the top band because the basin just took 2 hits in 5 days, the margin is already thin. Here's the twist. You don't need breach to win. Jam 2 intake bays at peak head and bruise 1 or 2 chutes so operators throttle to save slabs. Conservative operations under that pressure soak the corridor hard and long. Bridges drown by approaches, rails stall on soup ballast, substations arc in mist. Ports choke on brown water and silt tongues. In a Taiwan timeline, that's days you can't buy back. Amphib windows close not from explosions, but from schedules that miss their tides. Defenders can add pain back the other way. Decoys over actuator rooms, dummy bays lit like real ones, false radio chatter to burn attacker cycles. Hardened aerators and beveled lips where pitting like to start last season. Prepositioned actuator kits and flyaway pump banks to swap a casualty in hours, not days. Digital twins in a sandbox, so crews can run the ugliest scenario against live hydrology and learn the moves before the rain. Plot twist, proportionality lives in the grey. A focused strike on gates, aerators, and pumps in a storm is not a breach of the wall. It's coercive flooding, forcing the operator's safest choice to be the attacker's objective. That's why the PLA drills islanding when the forecast turns and shifts air defense to cover the inland spine. They know the strike math rides the hydrograph. They plan for a week when the river and intent push at once. And that, more than any headline threat, tells you where the real lever is. The slow kill, sediment, corrosion, and procurement delays. But wait, there's more. You don't need a missile or a crest to grind this machine down. The slow kill works grain by grain, hour by hour, and it hides in maintenance logs and parts lists, not headlines. Start with silt. During dirty passes, runners hear the sandstorm before operators see it. First a dry hiss, then that hard metallic buzz when turbine cavitation starts earlier at lower heads because blades aren't smooth anymore. Roughness seeds bubbles, bubbles implode, pits spread, vibration creeps up. You think you can nurse it. Then the next wet week hits and the same unit hits the threshold a notch sooner. Here's where things get interesting. That creep turns 5 to 7 year runner swaps into 3 to 5 year headaches on the most abused machines. Bearings run hotter after long grit spells. Guide vane bushings wear faster. Partial discharge calms down in the dry, then spikes after a humid fortnight. Procurement mirrors the pain. Expedited orders for cavitation-resistant alloys, wicket gate bushings by the crate, and seal kits flagged urgent. Heavy parts that should crawl by rail fly by air because downtime now beats dignity. You hear it in the tender language. Availability assurance packages, accelerated refurbishment cycles, post-event conditioning. That's triage disguised as routine. Corrosion under insulation is the quiet killer. Warm, wet air sneaks under lagging, sits on cable trays and control conduits, and turns tiny nicks into ground faults. Everyone who's opened a cabinet after a week of spray has seen it. A cabinet that sailed through last quarter throws nuisance trips after a week of spray. Crews strip lagging, re-wrap with better spec, add heaters, and move sensitive boards into drier rooms. All of that eats windows you swore you de-save for off-peak. Politics hates those windows. The grid wants megawatts in heat waves. Flood control wants empty space before rain. Managers want uptime curves shaped like a ruler. Something gives. Too often it's the shutdown you needed yesterday. Seals bleed in this climate. Intake gate elastomers harden early in grit and UV. Shaft seals on guide bearings weep at the worst second. Tiny O-rings in piezometer manifolds crack from age and chemistry. Each drip is small until it isn't. Oil in water finds you. Water in oil ruins a bearing. A misread pressure skews a core. So the warehouse carries double seal kits through storm season. Then a sanction scare or currency swing stretches lead times from 6 weeks to 6 months. Now you're living on inventory and praying the wrong gate cylinder doesn't start to weep in a typhoon. Drainage pumps, the unsung heroes against uplift, hate fines too. Silt slips past strainers, chews impellers, and knocks a few points off efficiency. Under peak head, those points bite. A bank that ran happy at last year's top band jogs late this year, heads in the rock climb, alarms nudge. Crews swap impellers for ceramic-coated versions, fit tighter seals, upsize motors, backflush lines. The next storm still drops grit where you don't want it. That's the loop. You buy back margin. The river bills you again. Dredging tries to cheat the bill. Crews notch sediment tongues near intakes late in the dry. The first flood fills the notch overnight. Booms corral more trash than last year. Cranes cough at rust ridges they didn't have time to grind. A rack hinge that should glide takes a second reset in lightning. Micro story. An operator pauses to confirm a crane fault clear. 5 minutes pass. Head ticks up 3 centimeters. That's another notch of fixes are the obvious answer on paper. Check dams and silt traps to catch the worst before it rides the pool. In practice, they fight land rights, budgets, and the pace of rain. Pilots appear. Programs stall. Meanwhile, sediment keeps robbing live storage. A meter lost here, half a meter there, and your drawdown window squeezes when the calendar says you need it wide. Rule bans already nudged earlier in the season to buy time. The slow kill keeps asking for more. Supply chains turn physics into dice. Precision bearings come from a few mills. Coatings rely on resins from specific chemistries. Control boards need chips that, in sanction seasons, vanish into grey markets. So technicians stretch life. Mixed firmware in mixed spares. Field repairs on boards you promised you retire. Handwritten labels on a cabinet everyone swears they won't reboot. None of that fails on blue sky days. It fails on hour 42 of spray and sirens when a gate move needs a clean yes. Grid behavior tells the truth you won't put on a poster. Press releases brag steady output. Tariff bumps and midnight maintenance. Blackouts whisper another story. A runner's out early. A neighbor runs restricted because vibration edges up. Dispatch leans on spill to meet flow. You move the same water for fewer kilowatt hours. Someone pays. Provinces nudge rates. Factories throttle in quiet belts. App data shows demand response pilots that just happen to land in crest weeks. That's the slow kill, priced in electrons. Here's the twist. The slow kill doesn't break concrete by itself. It compresses margin. Sediment roughens blades so cavitation starts sooner. Cavitation hammers slabs if you spare the runners. Corrosion hides under wraps until a humid week. Seals age in spray, pumps tire in grit, cables get cranky, spares arrive late. Each little debt is payable. Until storms stack, a gate hesitates, or a human reads a bad number at 2 a.m. That's when yesterday's shortcuts charge interest in minutes you don't have. So crews adapt, rotate units, bias flow to fresher runners, dose more air on chutes with thin cushion, pre-stage actuator kits and flyaway pump banks inland, hard enclosed cabinets, drill manual paths, all smart, all admissions. The river keeps its tab open. The slow kill keeps writing line items, and urgency keeps showing up as air-freighted parts and Sunday overtime, because the only thing more expensive than margin is the lack of it when the crest hits. Weather war, El Niño, atmospheric rivers, and cloud seeding. And that's when it gets wild, because the sky stopped behaving like averages and started stacking like freight cars. Late 2010s storms didn't arrive as neat peaks, they chained together. You definish a release plan for Pulse 1, glance at the radar, and realize Pulse 2 just cut the line. Forecast models promised a 2-day gap. Travel time in a basin, this big turn that into 12 hours on a good week. Operators who used to think in days learned to think in minutes, because the hydrograph rose like a broken staircase. Here's where things get interesting. El Niño shifts the dice. Warmer central Pacific waters tug the jet stream, tilt storm tracks, and supercharge moisture plumes. When those plumes drag inland as atmospheric rivers, they don't tease, they dump. The Yangtze's catchments wake on different clocks. Snowline here, monsoon tail there, so pulses arrive out of phase and then meet right where you don't want them to. The reservoir's job is to smooth chaos. But if last week already ran hot and live storage is pinched by sediment, you're boxed in. Hold and flirt with top bands, or dump and push brown water through cities that paved their marshes in the 200 boom. Cloud seeding sits in the middle like a rumor with receipts. Provinces fly silver iodide in drought windows and pop rockets in shoulder seasons. Does it move totals? Sometimes at the margins. Does it steer a loaded atmospheric river? No. In deluge, extra nuclei add noise, not mercy. That's the operational truth. So hydrologists treat seeding as a hedge in dry spells and a wash in big storms. The uncertainty matters anyway because coordination across provinces relies on clean signals. If one county swears it shaved a crest, another plans drawdown around that whisper. Hours slip, headroom shrinks. Now add temperature. Warmer air holds more water. A degree here means a lot there. Snowlines sit higher, meaning rain rides over lingering snowpack and melt joins rainfall in shoulder seasons. Catchments that used to stagger now overlap. A forecast marked moderate on 3 basins sums to ugly at the mainstem. Your perfect pre-release plan meets mudslides that close an upstream road, trash booms that load faster, a crane out for lightning shutdown, and a spill bay you already promised you'd spare because its lip took a beating last month. Minutes leak, head creeps. That's the weather war when you're under it. Backflow is the punchline the brochures underplay. When the mainstem rides high, tributaries can't dump cleanly. They shove water sideways into towns that grew tight to channels after the last big build-out. Pumps work until screens clog on weeds, bags, and sheet metal from a hillside slide. Substations cited for the flood maps of 2005 take missed they weren't armored for. You see it on nightlight maps, belts that brown out not because the dam failed, but because distribution sat 1 meter too low for the new stage duration curve. Those lights come back. The factory downtime doesn't. Debris turns timing into attacks. InSAR time series across the reservoir zone show slope creep sink to pool rises, millimeters most weeks, centimeters after hard push. Those aren't dam blocks, they're hillsides becoming rafts. A brown tongue peels off at the worst hour and slides toward booms already straining. Cranes groan. One intake bay jams. Neighbors take more flow. Operators juggle while thunder walks across the spillway and radios crackle through spray. That's how a storm stack turns into a minute deficit you can't buy back. Engineers counter with real moves. Pre-release earlier when models sniff El Niño pulses. Shift rule bands lower ahead of long plumes. Stage dredgers to nibble tongues near intakes in the last dry windows. Dose more air under the nap to keep cushion fat when grit tries to strip it. Stagger gate openings to share cavitation pain. Rotate turbines so one unit doesn't eat all the sand, and bias flow to fresher runners. They run midnight gate drills so actuators don't surprise them at noon. Every move buys inches and minutes. Here's the twist. The calendar changed to fit the sky. Quiet edits to rule curves slid storage lower earlier. Blackout rehearsals landed the night before crests, not the week after. Bridges posted surprise load limits the day the plume hit the model, not when clouds arrived. Hospitals tested diesel hours under full HVAC when the basin was still sunny. Open source picked it up. VIRS dimming belts ahead of rain. AIS barges of aggregate parking upriver before typhoons. Sentinel frames later revealing fresh patch tones on spillway lips where last month's nap turned noisy. Weather wrote the script. Satellites stamped the date. Downstream, exposure multiplies. The 200 ones built warehouses, chip fabs, and rail yards where fields used to soak. Raise a levee here and you squeeze the river there, higher, faster. Conservative releases to save slabs and runners stretch floods into long soaks. Bridges don't snap, they vanish by approach. Rails don't tear, they kink when ballast goes soup. Ports don't explode, they choke on silt tongues that settle overnight, fouling intakes and jamming propellers. Dredgers fix it later. The tide window you missed doesn't come back. Global spillovers travel that water. Grain moves on rail to port chains. Chemicals sit in low tanks because land was cheap. Semiconductors chase just in time. A week of brown water in the spine ripples into shipping rates, factory overtime, and insurance clauses. Reinsurers price it bluntly after clusters. Municipal bonds buy pumps and hire plinths. Traders front-run it with altimetry, night lights, and weather models. None of that cares about speeches. Weaponized weather talk gets loud in these weeks. People blame cloud seeding, point across borders, hint at sabotage. Physics shrugs. Big events don't care about rockets. Perception still taxes coordination, though. If trust phrase, pre-releases arrive late by an hour. An hour is a meter you didn't want. Plot twist. The dam doesn't have to crack for weather to win. El Niño stacks pulses, atmospheric rivers crush timing, cloud seeding muddies signals at the edge, and floodplain growth turns inches into bills. Operators adapt. Earlier cuts, fatter nap air, tighter drills, stealthy rule shifts. But each adaptation says the same thing. Clusters, not averages, run the show now. And clusters spend margin like cash. Taiwan, deterrence, and the forbidden target. So who actually benefits or panics if this wall has a bad week? In war games around Taiwan, planners draw two maps. One is missiles, airfields, and ports. The other is dull and deadly, rivers, rails, substations, and bridges. The Yangtze anchors that second map. If flood soak approaches, drown switchyards, and slow trains for even 3 to 5 days, mobilization drags. Factories that feed guidance kits, fuel pumps, and comms gear slip. Railheads that push armor east stall on soup ballast. Ports lose rhythm under brown water and silt tongues. You don't need breach to bend a timeline. You need delay. Deterrence logic says dams are taboo, civilian lifelines, catastrophic risk, the nuclear-adjacent fear. Beijing leans hard on that taboo. Touch it and you cross a line. But here, that's where it gets interesting. Modern strike math doesn't need to smash concrete. It aims at capacity, intake gates, spillway aerators, drainage, pump switchgear, and comms nerves. The goal isn't collapse, it's coercive flooding. Force conservative operations when head is high, so the safest move is long, heavy releases that drown your own logistics. The structure survives. The calendar doesn't. In a Taiwan clock, that's the win. Would that cross a red line internationally? Publicly, allies call any dam strike off limits. Privately, planners live in the grey. Proportionality and discrimination matter. A small, precise salvo during a storm that jams 2 bays and fuzzes sensors for minutes is not the same as breaching a wall. The doctrine language gets careful. Degrade capacity, preserve life. Nobody will say it on camera. The simulations still run because physics and timing make sense. Beijing knows this pressure from both ends. Defend hard and you reveal nerves. Visible point defenses on bays, hardened pump rooms, decoys, fiber reroutes. Hide it and you invite a bet that you can't keep the system stable at top band. So they split the difference. Civil language by day, military muscle by night. You see shelters for radar trucks tucked off service roads after disaster drills. You see boat booms that double as drone nets when forecasts turn. You see engineering regiments rehearsing pontoon spans on grounds that look exactly like scour-prone approaches. Lifeline and target on the same page. Here's the twist. The more they posture to shield it, the more the world tags it as leverage. Open source already reads the tells. VIIS dim belts before crests, altimetry discharge wobbles, AIS barges of aggregate upriver before typhoons, sentinel color shifts on spillway lips in the dry. Each defense add-on leaves a signature. Each signature tightens the circle that says, push here, the schedule slips. Wargame deltas show what a flood week buys. Baseline, armor trains pulse east, depots load on time, air defense units ring the coast, inject a 5-day soak in the central corridor. Bridges lose approaches. Temporary load limits stretch detours. Yards that sort long consist sit underwater. Factories flip to generators, then idle because diesel trucks can't cross. Rails snake as ballast liquefies under repeated surges. Even with the wall intact, conservative releases keep river stage high. Every delay eats a tide window. Amphibops hate missed tides more than they hate slogans. Escalation risk is the hard question. Does coercive flooding trigger out-of-scope retaliation? The answer sits in ambiguity. If a strike remains narrow, no wall breach, minimal civilian casualties, targeted at equipment with evident military effect, responses stay in kind. Counters on launchers, cyber slaps, air defense hunts. The taboo erodes without shattering. That's the risk line both sides dance on, and why the PLA seeds redundancy in galleries, adds analog fallback, and times islanding drills to crest windows. They're not just saving a dam, they're signaling we can ride this. Deterrence cuts both ways. Beijing hints the dam is off limits, which invites one more question. Why is this asset so sensitive? That question sends traders to scrape night lights, sends analysts to stack sentinel frames, and sends adversaries to tune strike math to the hydrograph. The louder the red line, the brighter the arrow. Allies model the counters too. Harden the soft bits, shield actuator rooms, bury switchgear deeper, preposition actuator kits and flyaway pump banks inland. Deploy mobile SDATCOMs to stabilize islands. Stage logistics for flood detours now, not in the rain. And make the political line simpler. Breach equals escalation. Capacity hits equal consequence. Draw a box around the worst to keep the grey narrow. Domestic politics might be the sharpest blade. The wall is pride. A week of brown water that cancels trains, soaks industrial parks, and blacks out prefectures while live fire runs across the strait is a narrative crisis. Blame hunts up the chain. Provinces point to unprecedented hydrology. Center points at foreign interference. Families on floodplains point to the app that told them to walk uphill the night before. Legitimacy bleeds by hour, not by megawatt. And here's the part nobody loves to say out loud. If a focused hit during El Niño can stall an invasion clock without touching a coastal city, that option sits on the table labeled last resort. The counter is boring and real. Low ahead earlier, drill manual gate paths, stage spares where drones can't see them, run islanding until it's muscle memory, and move the most critical factories off the flood spine. Pride hates it. Timelines love it. Plot twist, the forbidden target isn't just concrete, it's time. A river that soaks rails for 4 days denies a beach 200 miles away. If deterrence rests on certainty, the hydrograph stole that a decade ago. Markets, satellites, and the open source trap. Okay, so what shows up in the wild when the system gets tight? Night lights blink first. On clear evenings, VIRS pixels along the Yangtze fade a shade or two in the same belts that maintenance notices hit, usually the night before crest windows. It's subtle until you stack years. Then it looks like a heartbeat. Quant desks scrape those frames and flag a stress window days before any press office blinks. Radar satellites don't need sunlight. Sentinel-1 rides through clouds, and altimetry proxies a few kilometers downstream sketch stage shifts with decent fidelity. Here, that's where things get interesting. Discharge asymmetries jump out, plumes heavier on bays 5-8 one night, then 9-12 the next, while bulletins drone steady regulation. The flip often follows a midnight gate drill or a trash rack, Jim you'll never see on a daily. Orbits caught the wobble. Traders priced it by morning. Optical satellites add color in the dry. Fresh concrete tones on spillway lips show up like a bandage. Beveled edges red lighter. Patch geometry maps to the exact chutes that threw noisy spray last month. You don't need leaks. You need a calendar and a color wheel. Pair that with AIS, barges loaded with aggregate and cement cluster near upstream yards a day or two before typhoon's first bands. Rail spurs into quarries run hot. Supply chains move like someone circled a week in red. Insurance is the blunt instrument. After the late 2010s storm clusters, regional reinsurers thinned limits and fattened deductibles for hydropower. Brokers whispered about cascade hydrological events and slipped new exclusions into binders. Municipal treasurers downstream felt the pinch and floated resilience bonds. Levy tops, pump stations on higher plinths, substation relocation grants, hospital generators upsized to run full HVAC for 48 hours. The timing synced with those same satellite-flagged weeks. Actuarial math, orbital data, and bond coupons started marching in step. Retail data is the street barometer. Bottled water and battery sales pop in belts that match dam break footprints 2 days before rain. Pharmacies in those polygons pull extra insulin and antibiotics. Hardware stores sell out of sump pumps, contractor bags, and headlamps midweek, not on holidays. People learn the cadence when the app says maintenance and the sky is social noise adds texture. Posts about sirens and drone interference near the structure spike during nights when VIRS dims and altimetry wobbles. Could be training, could be a sensor drill. The point is the stack, lights, stage, chatter. When three signals rhyme, quant funds push buttons. They short river tide logistics, go long on pump makers, and trim throughput at ports they know will eat silt tongues. Cold, fast, profitable. Here's the twist. Open source transparency handcuffs spin. Say routine operations, and someone drops a side by side of last night's dimming belt and this morning's radar track. Say design capacity, and a thread lays out 5 years of quiet rule-band nudges. Denial becomes data because the mismatch is the story. The more a spokesperson smooths edges, the more models tighten uncertainty bands and charge for it. Steel and chemistry ratify the orbitals. Cavitation-resistant alloy orders jump a week before known plumes arrive. Specialty grout and underwater epoxy shipments tick up just after a storm passes. Coating vendors brag about on-time deliveries to critical infrastructure without naming the client. Then Sentinel shows a fresh patch where the copywriter wanted mystery. Meanwhile, pump makers report expedited impellers to key river facilities. AIS followed those crates upriver the day before. Grid behavior leaks through market structure. Locational marginal prices nudge during islanding hours. Ancillary service bids for reactive power support thicken exactly when the hydrograph rides the top band. A dispatch note that would bore a civilian makes a trader smile. More SDATCOMs online at 0200 equals more rain on the lake and maybe 1 unit on restricted load. The next line is a position. Unknown to most residents across town, logistics tweak quietly. Inland depots extend hours for kerosene. Fuel Bowsers pre-stage at school fields up a hill. Temporary sidings wake up. Container yard cameras show stacks thinning closest to the river and fattening a district inland. None of it makes the 6 o'clock. All of it stamps a clock on the risk. Satellites also timestamp quiet courage. In the dry that follows a rough week, you spot barges parked under the same bays you saw asymmetry on. Crane shadows stretch across 2 lips, not 12. A beige rectangle appears where pitting liked to start last season. The patch says, "We saw it, we fixed it." The cadence says, "We did it again." Plot twist, open source is a 2-edged blade. It warns civilians and disciplines managers. It also telegraphs stress to adversaries. Asymmetrical plumes in a storm tell a planner which bay stuck. A string of dim nights before a crest says islanding rehearsed and human bandwidth is busy. A conv of aggregate upriver 5 days early says the patch list is long. So the trap is simple. Every fix leaves a shadow. Every drill leaves a pixel trail. Every cautious pre-release reads like a headline in data, even when the press stays calm. You can't hide a midnight gate rehearsal from space. You can't talk an AIS barge out of a track. And once markets, insurers, and adversaries stitch those threads, the river stops being a local secret. It becomes a global schedule. Failure tree, what goes first, then what follows. Okay, so what actually gives way when minutes run out? Think chain, not cliff. The first weak link isn't concrete, it's control. Stakes are immediate. With the reservoir riding the top band, every second of delay adds force everywhere. One intake leaf or spillway gate hesitates a few centimeters. Trash, driftwood, a bent guide, or a hot actuator that missed a lube cycle. That tiny misalignment chews a seal, spikes motor load, and the bay sticks. Operators jog it. The alarm tree lights. Head keeps rising. Action looks mundane and deadly. Cranes scramble to clear booms while lightning snaps across the face. Crews try a partial lift, then a down and up to reseat the leaf. The leaf won't seat. With one bay out, neighbors take more discharge. Those bays jump to rougher regimes earlier because sediment already sanded their runners and spillway lips. Cavitation starts where the nap thins, lip edges, slab joints, and the noise in the galleries grows from hiss to gravel. Impact lands fast. Vibration climbs on the hard-working bays. Operators shave turbine load to protect pitted runners. More flow moves to spill. Head ticks up another few centimeters. Stakes leap because overtopping risk creeps in long before Hollywood sheets appear. Spray kisses crest blocks, then you see wet where it shouldn't be, over parapets that aren't armored for upstream to downstream flow. Crest drains help. They aren't a river. Action tightens. To save machines and avoid slab damage, crews stagger spillway openings across chutes, bias toward the healthiest lips, and hold back on the 2 panels that threw noisy spray last month. Cavitation cells still bite, each pit seeding the next. Downstream, the jet carves a scour hole deeper than last year's patch. Anchors feel it. Joints flutter. The nap looks wrong. Broken sheen, patchy air. In the galleries, pumps breathe grit they didn't want. A breaker chatters once, clears, then sits warm. Impact compounds. You've traded a stuck gate for early cavitation and toe scour. Uplift under a stressed slab grows as the hole deepens, and if a panel edges up a millimeter, water wedges under it and lift goes non-linear. That's plate lifting territory. Immediate stakes shift to drainage. If pump efficiency slipped 5% this season from fines, and it often does, your uplift margin thins right when you need it fat. Action turns to human bandwidth. Radios tangle under thunder. An HMI lags for seconds while someone cycles a view. A piezometer string in one gallery reads high. Is it spray on a connector or a real head bump? The shift lead calls for a confirm. Those 30 seconds are the most expensive on the river. Meanwhile, debris pulses, fed by those in SAR mapped slopes that creep under fast pool rises. Press booms again. A crane brake chatters in rain. Protocol says stop, reset, verify. Another minute gone. Impact ripples outward instantly. A governor trips to save a buzzing runner. Megawatts vanish. Voltage sags. SDATCOMs lean in. Dispatch dumps low to hold frequency. Street lights flicker in belts that match last year's islanding drills. Hospitals flip to generators and start counting diesel hours under full HVAC because air not lights is the constraint. Factories stall mid-batch. Sensitive chem runs head for scrap. Stakes expand downstream. Bridges don't fail from force. They drown by approach as conservative releases stretch the flood. Rails kink where ballast turns to soup. Yardmasters park trains on higher sidings and lock brakes. Substations hiss in mist, then trip, then sit behind brown water. Pumps at backflow-prone tributaries clog with weeds and roof tin. Crews clear screens. The water climbs anyway. Meanwhile, ports slow as brown silt tongues settle in channels overnight, jamming propellers and fouling intakes. Dredgers won't fix that today. Action cuts into the civil fabric. Evacuations roll on roads that were dry at dawn and disappear by noon. Refugees pack the county seats scripted by those civil defense polygons. Pharmacies in the same belts hand out the insulin they stockpiled 2 days ago when the maintenance alert hit. The PLA peels engineering regiments from coastal drills, throws pontoon spans at drowned approaches, and runs convoy ferries where rails quit. Every truck inland is a pallet, not at a coastal marshalling yard. Logistics is zero sum on a clock. Impact turns technical pain into political heat. The line from equipment, anomaly, and extreme weather to leadership failure is short. Local feeds replay last month's blackout rehearsal and ask why it wasn't enough. Procurement ledgers leak. Air-freighted actuator kits, ceramic-coated pump parts, emergency grout. Insurance surcharges trend. Municipal bonds for resilience find buyers and critics. The myth of endless margin meets a wet week and breaks on contact. Meanwhile, secondary dominoes multiply. A wastewater plant overtops. Bacteria spike downstream. A small chemical works on a tributary leaks into a back channel. A downstream mid-sized dam, never designed for this hydrograph, is forced into ugly releases at the same hour yaws are peaking, and the waves meet in a suburb built after the last map. Helicopters make pictures, not clearance. Here's the twist. None of this requires a breach. The trunk holds, the canopy withers. The precise, therefore, chain is ruthless. Gate jam, therefore neighbor bays cavitate earlier, therefore toe scour deepens, therefore uplift grows, therefore slabs flirt with lift, therefore turbines trip, therefore voltage sags, therefore islands form, therefore approaches drown, therefore rails stall, therefore ports choke, therefore forces divert, therefore timelines slip. Every therefore costs minutes you can't mint. And when minutes run out, safe choices get ugly. Open wider to save concrete and you soak the spine. Hold back to save the spine and you hurt the concrete. Either way, the river collects the debt, the slow kill, and the storm stack rote. That's the failure tree. It's not a movie, it's a clock. The structural lie. You think you know this story. Giant dam, bigger pride. Here's the twist. The real danger isn't a crack. It's a promise that kept shrinking while the paperwork changed its tone. Early brochures bragged about scouring sediment, generous drawdown room, and fat uplift margins. After the late 2010s storm clusters, the language softened. Adequate became within seasonal tolerance. Seepage bands were clarified, and rule curves nudged lower ahead of wet months. Each edit is a brace nailed to yesterday's claim. What nobody said out loud was how fast assumptions aged under stacked storms and grit. Thermal movement, expected. Early differential settlement, expected to taper. But logs started showing cycle-locked drift that didn't fully come home at low pool. Not a cartoon bend, just a small bias linked to head. InSAR across the reservoir's slopes sang the same rhythm. Water up, hills move. Water down, some of that motion sticks. Inside the galleries, piezometers ticked higher a hair faster after hard weeks. Pumps ran a touch longer to pull heads down. Crews answered with deeper grout curtains, extended drains, and anchors across joints that once relied on gravity alone. Those aren't upgrades for pride. They're insurance bought after reading the gauges. Censorship culture did the rest. A patriotic engineering habit loves victory photos and clean lines, so warnings slipped into footnotes. Case studies praised monitoring systems more than risk envelopes. A few hydro papers that tied sediment heavy passes to accelerated runner swaps in large plants didn't get encores the next season. Not a purge, just a cooling breeze. Meanwhile, maintenance ledgers read like triage. Foundation remediation, spillway surface conditioning, gate alignment optimization, drainage capacity enhancement, each clustering right after stacked rains. If this were routine wear, those jobs would sit on 5-year plans. They popped up on Tuesdays after typhoons. Here's where things get interesting. Quiet admissions also hid in policy. Seasonal storage bans edged lower before strong El Niño winters. Prefectures downstream floated, resilience, bonds for levee tops, pump stations on higher plinths, and hospital generators sized for full HVAC. Reinsurers thickened catastrophe layers and slipped cascade hydrological event into contracts. Nobody wrote Three Gorges in the headlines. Actuarial tables and bond coupons told the same story anyway. Clusters, not averages, rule the river now. The hardware tells it better than any speech. Spillway lips show fresh tones from aeration tweaks and edge bevels where pitting started last season. Intake trash racks get clearance optimization, code for stronger hinges and faster cranes because debris pulses grew. Drainage pumps swap to ceramic-coated impellers and tighter seals. Control cabinets move into drier rooms with heaters and better gasketing. Fiber reroutes around wet galleries. Dual power to sensor nodes. You don't build ears and lungs on a body you're sure won't sprint again. You do it because the last sprint left a limp. The procurement language evolved too. Emergency actuator refurbishment kits became availability assurance packages. Rush grout turned into targeted pressure injection. Same parts, safer words. Payment terms shifted to heavier advances, and heavy components that should crawl by rail flew by air in storm seasons. That's not optics. That's urgency priced in freight. Now fold in NASA's reservoir load math. Moving inland water measurably nudges Earth's rotation. If the planet notices, grout joints will too. No one's claiming catastrophic displacement. We're saying the load and unload cycles are big enough that micro-motions in rock and concrete are rational. The scandal isn't motion. It's the myth that the field stayed flat while operators kept adding drains and anchors. Add the PLA overlay and the myth cracks wider. Once doctrine tags the asset, lifeline, and target, drills align with crest windows. Islanding rehearsals kiss peak head nights. Evacuation routes match dam break polygons. Air defense belts shift to cover the inland spine when storms stack. Civilian apps call it flood safety. Doctrine calls it hedging against a mode of failure you won't print. The lie isn't that the dam will fail tomorrow. It's that strategy treats ugly week as normal enough to rehearse. Markets and satellites box the narrative in. VIRS dimming belts the night before crests. Sentinel frames catching fresh patches on lips, AIS barges of aggregate upriver before typhoons, and altimetry wobbles during steady regulation. All of it syncs with procurement bursts and municipal bonds for pumps and higher plinths. Denial becomes data because the mismatch is the message. Traders, insurers, and adversaries read the same stack and priced the same risk. So let's say it plain. The structural lie isn't a secret crack. It's the gap between the frozen story and the living system. Engineers adapted. Deeper curtains, more drains, runner swaps pulled forward, aeration retuned, anchors added, cabinets hardened, manual paths drilled. Managers adapted. Rule curves trimmed earlier, insurance hedged, costs laundered into softer budgets, civilians trained to walk the right routes. All rational, all necessary, none compatible with invincibility. Where does that leave us? With a wall that stands and a margin that shrank. With hydrology that shifted to clusters, sediment that roughens steel, slopes that breathe with the pool, and pumps that hate grit. With PLA calendars that rehearse the same weak markets already front-run. The structure didn't lie. The story did. And stories don't hold water when the crest arrives. Scenarios: patch, pivot, or play chicken. So what now? Fix it, change the game, or bluff. Patch means pain now to buy time later. Cut sediment at the source. Reel silt traps and check dams upstream, even if it means relocating valleys and losing cheap industrial land. Armor the spillways for the river you have. Retune aerators, deepen anchors, bevel lips, add ceramic liners where cavitation starts. Extend grout curtains, add drains, and upsize grit-tolerant drainage pumps. Swap the worst runners early with cavitation-hard alloys. Pre-stage flyaway actuator kits and pump banks inland. Manage retreat where backflow wins. Lift key levees, lower others on purpose. Move switchyards and hospitals a few meters up. Publish clearer rule bands earlier. It's money, and it admits the envelope moved. Pivot means stop betting the grid on one wall. Build pumped storage inland, gas peakers as shock absorbers, and big batteries near factories so crest weeks don't kill production. Diversify industry off the flood spine. Chip fabs, logistics hubs, data centers on higher ground with their own islands. Hard test the basin as one system. Shared gauges, common InSAR feeds, unified models, and pre-agreed release triggers. Transparency beats whispers. Timing beats pride. Play chicken is cheap until it is. Keep the myth. Massage rule curves in footnotes, drill more in the dark, and threaten retaliation to hold the taboo. Hope the crest lands on a quiet week. One sticky gate, one clogged pump, one precise strike during a storm, and the margin you claim turns out to be a story. Allies and markets will force the hand, sanction critical spares or pre-position them, price risk into bonds, reward inland builds. The river already set the test. Patch and pivot pass it. Chicken doesn't. That wall powers a nation and holds it hostage. One bad week can redraw maps and rewrite timelines. If you want the receipts on how rail chokeprints multiply this risk, watch our next episode. Subscribe for more proof-driven war math. Share this with someone who thinks dams are just power plants, and tell us the one open source tell you'll track before the next crest.